Welcome to Patriots. If you're new to our channel, please subscribe. Karl Marx. Marx calls his theory as parsis. Parsis means action based on theory and theory leading to action. It means that whatever we do should be based on proper understanding, and on the basis of understanding we should formulate our policies. Marx was concerned with the extreme exploitation of the poor by the capitalist class. Hence, he wanted to end exploitation to give a life of dignity to the poor. He was critic of capitalism. He considered capitalism as inhuman. Since Marx is a critic of capitalism, he is a believer of socialism. Thus, Marx is a socialist. Capitalists dig their own graves. It shows contradiction in capitalism which will result into the destruction of capitalism on its own. The purpose of production should be needed, whereas in capitalism it becomes greed or profit. Capitalism creates the contradiction between man and society. The other person is not a fellow human being rather a competitor, a source of insecurity. In capitalism, labor of the worker becomes the source of his own exploitation. Capitalism is driven by profit. To maintain profit, we have to keep the cost of production low. To keep the cost of production low, workers will be given low wages. Workers cannot be given more than what is enough for his survival. He cannot be given the surplus because he may not come to the work next day. The wages are already low, and to maintain the profit maximum they decrease wages. Capitalists will bring technology. Others will be also forced to do the same. It will result into loss of job of workers. It means reduction in workers' bargaining power. Workers will be more in number, hence they will be forced to work at low wages. As capitalism will advance, its contradictory nature will become more and more clear. The exploitation will keep on increasing. Capitalism is monopolistic in nature. Competition will become more and more tough. Only few capitalists will be able to survive. Small players in the market will keep coming out of market. They will also join the rank of workers. A situation will emerge where society will be divided into two classes, haves and have-nots. The situation is called polarization of classes. On one hand, small number of people will be holding the entire amount of wealth in the society. On the other hand, there will be mass poverty. This is a situation of disequilibrium in the society. Equilibrium is the law of the nature, and hence disequilibrium cannot continue for long. Revolution will establish the equilibrium. As capitalism will advance, its exploitation keep on increasing. More number of people will be facing the exploitation. This situation will convert class itself into class for itself. Capitalism will always face the cycle of boom and bust. Why cycle? The capitalism will advance. More and more number of people will become jobless. There will be lots of goods, but people will not be having the purchasing power. It will result into the slowdown of economy. There will be more jobless. Hence, capitalism creates the condition of its own destruction. Capitalists dig their own graves. Difference in between the capitalism and socialism. Capitalism denotes private ownership over the means of production. In capitalism, motive of production is profit rather than need. Socialism is a modern philosophy. It emerged as a reaction against capitalism. It is based on the realization of the inhuman nature of capitalism. According to socialists, industrial society can be based on socialist principles. It is not necessary to base on its capitalist principles. Marx calls his socialism as scientific. He calls his socialism scientific, and socialism before his socialism as utopian. Marx was not the first person to give socialist ideas. Socialist ideas emerged in French Revolution, ideas of equality and fraternity. Marx does not believe in the concept of conscience. He does not believe in God or idea. Hence, there is no point appealing to God or conscience. Hence, Marx suggests, workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose except your chains. Chains denote religion, nation, etc. The aim of Marx socialism is to establish communism. Comparison between capitalism and socialism. In capitalism, there are two classes. Capitalist is exploiters. State is instrument of capitalist class. Socialism, that is dictatorship of proletariat. There are two classes. Worker is exploiter. State is instrument of working class. In capitalism is democracy, but democracy of minority. It is a dictatorship of minority over majority. In socialism is the principle of democracy. It is a democracy of majority and dictatorship of majority over minority. The principle of distribution in capitalism. Capitalists claim that they give reward in accordance to the work. In socialism, the principle is from each according to his ability, to each according to his work. In capitalism, workers are forced to work beyond the ability and to pay according to the work. Communism is a classless society. It is because private ownership is abolished. Property comes under common ownership. Hence, there is no class division. All belongs to one class. Since classless will end, state will become reductant and state will be wider away. Communism is utopia of Marx. It is Marx's ideal state. Marx's ideal state and Gandhi's ideal state both are stateless society. Both Gandhi and Marx are anarchists. Anarchy in literal sense means absence of state. There are two ways in which scholars have described anarchy. In Hobbesian view, anarchy is a painful situation. Life of man will be in chaos. Man cannot live in peace with others in absence of state. In Marx's view, anarchy is the state of perfect happiness, perfect freedom. State is an instrument of exploitation. Man is a social by nature. Man has enough reason to live in peace with others. How life will be governed in the absence of state. The role of state will be taken by the voluntary association or self-help group. There is a lot of similarity between Marx communism and Gandhi's Term Raj. The only difference is in its method. Gandhian method gives peaceful appeal to the conscience of the capitalist class. In Marx's method, suggests violent overthrow of capitalism. In the words of Karl Marx, violence is the midwife of change. There has been no birth without blood. Socialism. In socialism, class exists, state exists. Socialism is not perfect democracy. It is a dictatorship of proletariat. In communism, it's a classless society. It's a stateless society. It is a perfect democracy. The principle in socialism, principle of distribution from each according to his ability to each according to his work. Communism, from each according to his ability to each according to his need. In socialism, it is a transition phase which will come immediately after revolution. Communism, it is itself the end of history. Historical materialism. The purpose of historical materialism is to explain history, the causes of history. To explain the causes of history. Marx wanted to change capitalism and to establish communism. He wanted to know how history changes, which factors play the role. Marx first analyzed Hegel's theory of history. Hegel's theory of history is idealistic interpretation of history. According to Hegel, history is the result of a dialectic movement of ideas. Marx suggested that Hegel's theory is not scientific explanation of history rather than political, ideological, theological explanation of history. Marx claims his theory as scientific. In order to understand history scientifically, we have to understand what was the first historical act of man. He wanted to know whether thinking or action is more important. Marx has given following stages of human history. History denotes change in the mode of production, means of production, force of production, and relations of production. History denotes change in the mode of production, means of production, forces of production, and relations of production. First one is prehistoric stage, the primitive communism. Initially, property was held in common, hence no classes, no struggle, no state. Why he has given the concept of primitive communism? This shows that man once lived without primitive property and without state also. Second one is slave society, masters and slaves. Since classes were there, so class struggle is there, and so state is there. Third one is feudalism, feudal and serfs. Since classes are there, so class struggles were there, and so state was there. Fourth one is capitalism, two classes, that is capitalists and workers. Fifth one is socialism. This is a stage which will come immediately after communist revolution, which will overthrow capitalism. Two classes, workers and capitalists. Worker will be the exploiter. Now state will be controlled by workers. Hence Marxist scholars also prefers to call this stage as dictatorship of proletariat. Sixth one is communism. There will be peaceful change from socialism to communism. Classes are abolished. State will wither away. State to perfect freedom and perfect equality, perfect happiness. Since classes will end, history will end. This one is dialectic materialism. Marx has borrowed the concept of dialectics from Hegel. The only difference is that Hegel has given dialectic idealism, whereas Marx given dialectic materialism. According to Hegel, history is a product of dialectic movement of idea. According to Marx, history is the product of dialectic movement of matter. According to Marx, economic structure is the basic structure. Economic structure is the basic structure. He has also given three laws: unity of opposites, negation of negation, quantity changes into quality. Central theme in the idea of dialectics is the concept of struggle or contradiction. It is because of struggle history moves. According to Marx, in order to make history, man has to live. In order to live, man has to eat. In order to eat, man has to work or perform action. Between manual labor and intellectual labor, more important is manual labor. Society can live without the work of intellectuals, but society cannot live without the work of manual workers. It is a false consciousness to think that the role of intellectuals is more important than those of workers. He blames thinkers like Plato and Aristotle to establish that those who are men of reason are ought to be the master and permanently deprive those who perform manual work. According to Marx, intellectual class is exploiter class. The workers should never listen to intellectuals, philosophers, church fathers. They only generate false consciousness. For example, in India context, we can compare intellectuals like Brahmins giving theories justify subordination to Shudras and Dalits. Marx's concept of society, origin of society. According to Marx, society is the division of labor. People form the society for the task of production. Production is the necessity for survival. Production is the social activity. It cannot be done alone. The basic structure of society is the economic structure. All relations are relations of production. Economic structure means structure of production or material structure. The early society is society of hunters and gatherers. Marx views on structure of society. Marx is a structuralist. He has studied the society as a structure. According to him, economic structure is the fundamental structure or basic structure. Marx base and superstructure model of society. This is the basic structure. Economic structure is considered as the basic structure. Above it, superstructures. Subjects comes political system, church, family, education, institution, media, all are superstructures. Economic structure is the basic structure. Whatever happens in society, economy is factor. State, church, family, education, institution, media, all are superstructure. Superstructure is the reflection of the base. Superstructure is not depend of base. It's not independent. It's not independent of base. It is grounded in the base. The nature of base will determine the nature of superstructure. Example, if mode of production is feudal, family system will join family. If mode of production is capitalist, there will be nuclear families. Even the ideas or ideologies will be shaped by economic system. When the economic system will be capitalist, ideology of individualism will be promoted. Let's look at more about base and superstructure. The base and superstructure are two linked theoretical concepts developed by Karl Marx, one of for socialism. Base refers to the production forces or materials or resources that generate goods society needs. Superstructure describes all other aspects of society. Society's superstructure includes cultural, ideology, norms, identities that the people inhabit. In addition, it refers to the social institution, political structure, state, or society governing apparatus. Marx argued that superstructure grows out of the base and reflects the ruling class interest. As such, superstructure justify how the base operates and defends the power of elite. Neither the base or superstructure is naturally occurring or static. They are both social creation or accumulation of constantly evolving social interactions between people. In German ideology, written with Friedrich Hegel, Marx offered a critique of Hegel's theory about how society operates. Based on principles of idealism, Hegel asserted that ideology determines social life, that people's thoughts shape the world around them. Hegel asserted that ideology determines social life, that the people's thoughts shape the world around them. Considering the historical shifts production has undergone, especially the shift from feudalist to capitalist production, Hegel's theory did not satisfy the Marx. Karl Marx believed that the shift to capitalist mode of production had sweeping implications for the social structure. He asserted that it reconfigured the superstructure in drastic ways and instead posed a materialist way of understanding history, known as historical materialism. His ideas posit that what we produce in order to live determines all else in the society. Building on this concept, Marx posed a new way of thinking about relationship between thought and lived reality. Importantly, Marx argued that this is not neutral relationship, as a great deal depends on the way superstructure emerges from the base. The place where norms, values, beliefs, ideology reside, superstructure legitimizes the base. It creates the condition in which relations of production seem fair and natural, though they may actually be unjust and designed to benefit the ruling class only. Marx argued that religious ideology that urges people to obey authority and work hard for salvation is one way superstructure justifies the base, as it generates the acceptance of one's conditions as they are. After Marx, philosopher Antoni Gramsci elaborated the role of education plays in training people to obediently serve in their designated roles in the workforce. As Marx did, Gramsci wrote about how the state or political apparatus functions to protect the elite's interests. For example, the federal government has bailed out private banks that have collapsed. In his earlier writings, Marx committed himself to the principle of historical materialism and casual friendship between base and superstructure. However, his theory grew more complex. Marx reframed the relationship between base and superstructure as dialectical, meaning that each influenced other. Hence, if the base changes, so does superstructure reverse occurs as well. Marx expected the working class to eventually revolt because he thought that once they realized how exploited class were for the benefit of the ruling class, they would decide to change matters. They would lead to the significant change in the base, how goods are produced and under what conditions could fit shift. So next is about the relations of production. The man enters into the system of production. Either he enters as owners of means of production, haves, and non-owners as have-nots. Haves will have bargaining power over have-nots. One will be the exploiter and other will be the exploiter. Man's relationship with the mode of production explains his class. There are two classes in the society, haves and have-nots. What type of relationship can be there between haves and have-nots? It will be a relationship of exploiter and exploiter. Hence, it will be a relationship of struggle or class struggle. Hence, there will always be a conflict of interest. The real identity of a person is identity of his class and not of his religion or nation. Hence, the real politics is the politics of class. What is the message? Workers should understand that their real interest is with the members of their class. They should not develop the false consciousness that the other person belongs to his nation or religion. Hence, the workers of the world have to come together. They have common interests. Surplus value. Surplus value is profit. According to Marx, labor is the source of value of any good. In capitalism, capitalist does not give share to the workers in profits. Ideally, workers should have share in surplus. The surplus becomes capital. It increases the bargaining power of capitalists. More and more worker works, more surplus he generates. More surplus is generated, the bargaining power of capitalist increases and that of worker decreases. Hence, the worker is forced to work where the labor of his body is working against him. Alienation. From his book Economic and Philosophical Manuscript, inspired by Hegel and Friedrich Feuerbach, Marx wanted to show that so-called freedom in the capitalist countries is actually alienation rather than freedom. The so-called freedom in the capitalist countries is actually alienation rather than freedom. Freedom in capitalist societies is false consciousness. Freedom means doing what one wants to do. Freedom means doing what one wants to do. Freedom is the source of happiness, well-being. For Marx, real freedom is the freedom of necessities. It means when the basic needs of man are fulfilled, only then man is free. Freedom can never come in capitalist society. Freedom is possible only in communism, when man is fully assured that he can do what he wants to do, and society assists for the protection of his basic necessities. The so-called freedom is isolation. Capitalism destroys the organic link between man and his society. It gives rise to atomistic man, the abstract individual. Freedom can never come in the capitalist society. Freedom is only possible in communism, when man is fully assured that he can do what he wants to do, and society assists for the protection of his basic necessities. The so-called freedom is isolation. Capitalism destroys the organic link between man and his society. It gives rise to atomistic man, the abstract individual. It was Hegel who first explained the alienation. According to Hegel, on this earth man gets alienated from God, which is the cause of unhappiness of man. Man gets alienated from God. The alienation of man ends in the state because state is a march of God on earth. Feuerbach has the group of young Hegelians who were trying to understand Hegel. Feuerbach came to opposite conclusion. He held that God is the source of alienation. Hence, to be happy, we should be free from religion. He held that God is the source of unhappiness. Why? When we look at the God, we feel bad about ourselves. The God reminded us about our weakness. Marx believed that it is not enough to be free from God. For the real freedom, we need to change the basic structure of the society, how capitalism alienates man. Capitalism does not allow man to live as per his true nature. Man is creative by nature, man is social by nature. Capitalism destroys the human essence. In capitalism, man faces alienation at four levels. Alienation from the purpose of production. The process of production has become so mechanized that man is reduced to mere cog in the wheel. Alienation from the product of his labor. Production has become so much specialized that one does not even know what final shape its labor has got. Alienation from society. Working conditions are much that man does not have the scope for realization of his social nature. Alienation from himself. The cumulative effect of alienation at three levels means man gets alienated from himself. Hence, there is no real freedom or real happiness in capitalism. Alienation can be ended by establishing communism, by destroying capitalism. In communism, man will produce what he wants. In communism, there is no contradiction between man and the society. For Marx, the so-called liberty in capitalist society is false consciousness alienation. True freedom will come only in communism. In communism, people will work according to their ability and get according to their need. Freedom means doing what one wants to do. This is possible only when basic necessities are fulfilled. So alienation from the process of production. The process of production has become so mechanized, man reduced to mere cog in the wheel. Alienation from product of his labor. Production has become so much specialized that one does not even know what final shape his labor has got. Alienation from society. Working conditions are much that man does not have scope for realization of his social nature. Alienation from himself. The cumulative effect of alienation at three levels is man gets alienated from himself. Hence, there is no real freedom or happiness in capitalism. The alienation can be ended by establishing communism. Marx for false consciousness. Religion is the opium of people. Nation or nationalism is an ideology or false consciousness created by propertied class to break the solidarity of workers. The poor should come out of false consciousness and develop true consciousness. False consciousness emerges when we listen to intellectuals. To develop true consciousness, one has to stand its own feet. One should look at the material conditions of life, understand the objective conditions of life objectively rather than subjectively. Gandhi used the term Harijan for Dalits. It is a subjective understanding, not objective understanding. According to Ambedkar, Harijans is a misguided term. They actually depressed class. Marx explains conscious at two levels. Class in itself and class for itself. Class in itself denotes low level of consciousness. When people understand that he belongs to particular class, or when worker understand that he is from working class, the capitalist from other class. Class for itself. This is a high level of consciousness, true consciousness, when worker understand his exploitation. When worker will understand his exploitation, he will become class for itself. He will take up his arm in his hand. When exploitation reaches its extreme, class in itself changes in the class for itself. So class in itself denotes low level of consciousness. When person understands that he belongs to a particular class, or when worker understands that he is from working class. What is about a class for itself? It's the high level of consciousness, true consciousness, when the worker understands his exploitation. When worker will understand his exploitation, he will become class for itself. It is not our consciousness that determines our existence. It is our existence that determines our consciousness. Marx's concept of historical materialism. Marx has criticized Hegel. According to Hegel, idea is real, idea real is rational. According to Marx, Hegel is standing on his head. Hegel is standing on his head. It is a matter, not the idea, that is reality. It is matter and not idea that is reality. It is matter is reality. On the basis of the base superstructure model, Marx has shown the economic structure is the basic structure. Ideology, idea, ideology, religion are part of the superstructure. Superstructure is never independent of base. The class which controls the economic structure also controls the superstructure. The real interest is the interest of the class. Ideology, religion develop false consciousness. The real interest is the interest of the class. Ideology, religion develop false consciousness. Working classes should understand their class interest. They should go for the objective understanding of their objective conditions. Once they will understand the conditions of their condition, they will develop a true consciousness. Class for itself. The class in itself will change into class for itself. Right? The class in itself, exploitation, when they came to understand that's true consciousness, calls for itself. Once the true consciousness comes, it will not possible to exploit them anymore. Theory of class and class struggle. The history of all hitherto existing society is a history of class struggle. History is because of class struggle. Means dialectics between classes or conflicts of interest between two classes. One is have and other is have nots. One is exploited and other is exploited. The relationship between exploited and exploited, relationship between exploited and exploited has to be a relation of struggle. The theory of class struggle is based on theory of historical materialism. The class struggle is located in the mode of production. In all class divided societies, there will be class struggle. Next is Dictatorship of Proletariat. In the critique of Gotha program, Marx and Engels have made the following observation. Between capitalist and communist society lies a period of revolutionary transformation of the one into other. There corresponds to this also a political transition period in which the state can be nothing but revolutionary dictatorship of proletariat. The concept means that it is the power in the hands of working people for building up a socialist society. In the State and Revolution, Lenin says, dictatorship of proletariat is the rule unrestricted by law and based on force of the proletariat over the bourgeoisie. A rule enjoy the sympathy and support of the laboring and unexploited masses. In the proletarians, we are organized into class and establish the supremacy over the bourgeoisie, and the purpose of this is to emancipate the workers, then that can be termed dictatorship of proletariat. The dictatorship of proletariat, according to Lenin, is a specific form of class alliance between proletariat, the one car of working class, and the numerous non-proletariat strata of the working people. On the majority of these strata, and the alliance of the final establishment and consolidation of socialism. Proletariats use the dictatorial power for the suppression of the bourgeoisie as well as to destroy the citadel of power built up by the capitalists in collaboration with the state authority. The suppression of bourgeoisie and the destruction of the state power both are essential precondition of the emancipation of proletarians. In other words, it is the rule and oppression of minority over the majority. In Marxian terminology, the terms means form of government of the majority established to crush the capitalist rule and oppression. The dictatorship of proletariat has a special meaning in Marxism. Through the establishment of dictatorship of proletariat, the advent of communism will be very easy. Once the counter-revolutionary force are destroyed and the state comes under the full control of the proletariat, the meaning and significance of dictatorship will tend to evaporate. Dictatorship of the proletariat is a definite form of government. Marx and Engels, Helen, and the various writings have dealt with the major aspects of the concept, and this treatment reveals the dictatorship of proletariat is both essential and inevitable. Marx and Engels were convinced that the bourgeoisie states an instrument of exploitation could not be amended, but at any cost be destroyed. The emancipation of proletarians is impossible so long the bourgeoisie state continues to exist and exercise its power over a proletarian. The bourgeoisie state machinery has to be broken and smashed from top to bottom. To achieve this lofty ideal, a gigantic machinery or institution must be created. This implies the essentiality of dictatorship of proletariat. In bourgeoisies, freedom is the freedom of minority, freedom of elite. Great minority, great majority of the masses are deprived of values and fruits of democracy. This is to be revised, and for that, the proletarians must have sweeping power in every sphere of society. The abolition of capitalism gives real freedom and democracy to all. Simultaneously, bourgeoisie system to private ownership of property is to be destroyed. Socialism and private property cannot coexist. See, once the counter-revolution forces are destroyed and the state comes under the full control of the proletariat, the meaning and significance of dictatorship will tend to evaporate. Dictatorship of proletariat is a definite form of government. Marx and Engels and Lenin in the various writings had dealt with a major aspect of the concept, and its treatment reveals the dictatorship of proletariat is both essential and inevitable. Marx and Engels were convinced that bourgeoisie states an instrument of exploitation could not be amended, but at any cost be destroyed. The emancipation of proletarians is impossible so long the bourgeoisie state continues to exercise power over proletariat. Bourgeoisie state machinery has to be broken and smashed from the top to bottom. To achieve the lofty ideal of a gigantic machine institution must be created. This implies the essentiality of dictatorship of proletariat. This is about the Marx criticism. Marx has been criticized as a reductionist. He has reduced the complex phenomena of history to the single cause, that is economic cause. Hence, his theory is called economic determinism. His economic reductionism has not been criticized by non-Marxists like Max Weber as well as neo-Marxists like Althusser. Max Weber criticized Karl Marx as a mono-causal explanation of history. Max Weber, in his book Protestant Ethics and Rise of Capitalism, has shown how superstructure, in words of Karl Marx, like religion, has given rise to capitalism. How superstructure, in the words of Marx, like religion, has given rise to capitalism. Even before Althusser, Gramsci found flaws in the Marx theory of history. Marx has ignored the role of cultural and ideological factors shaping history. Althusser has given law of overdetermination, means economic factor is overdetermined in Marx. Economic factor is overdetermined in Marx. Althusser has given multiple structural approach. Althusser has studied the Russian Revolution. Russian Revolution emerged from the political structure, not from economic structure. Determinism is called non-scientific thinking. Determinism is called non-scientific thinking. Determinism represents fundamentalism. Determinism implies that person believes that his view is scientific. Determinism implies that person believes that his view is scientific, ultimately true, and cannot be questioned. Marx claimed himself to be scientific. He rejected earlier explanation of false consciousness. For followers of Marx, Marx was God. Hence, Marx has projected as God. It is believed that all preconditions are bound to happen. However, it was proved that Marx was a God that has failed. Marx was a God that has failed. Karl Popper, in his book Open Societies and Its Enemies, called Plato, Hegel and Marx as the enemies of open society. Karl Popper has criticized Hegel and Marx for committing the guilt of historicism. Karl Popper has criticized Hegel and Marx for committing the guilt of historicism. It denotes ideological interpretation of history. Our political motivated explanation of history. According to Karl Popper, mass theory cannot be considered as scientific. It does not fulfill the criteria of falsification. It is a criteria to regard particular theory as scientific in social sciences. According to Karl Popper, mass theory cannot be considered as scientific. It does not fulfill criteria of falsification. It is a criteria to regard a particular theory as scientific in social science. In social science, we cannot have theories based on experiments, as happens in the natural science. In social science, theory can be regarded as scientific if it is open for critical evaluation or examination. Scientific theories are possible only in open societies, because freedom of speech and expression it cannot produce in closed societies. This is all about Karl Marx. If you like the video, please subscribe our channel. Please share the video with your friends.